let's do impound.
Okay. On this one, a lot of questions and concerns at the last time that it was talked about, and we're now here with, I think, additional information, I think, that will assist you with, hopefully assist you with understanding the concerns and give more detail regarding each of the definitions or actions that might occur. Chief did a lot of work of trying to just provide more detail and provide understanding. So I don't really know what direction my questions might exist, whether it's better to take a question or rather than, there's a lot there. Take a
I
lot of
assume
time.
everyone's read, assume the their documents. Folks. You wanna start with Travis? Mr. Ritchie?
Being I was kind of one that facilitated it anyway. Obviously, there is an issue. When they talk about 30 to 40 driving under suspensions a month, the numerous driving without insurance, and all the other things that go along with it. Here's where I'm at on it. Well, I guess I got a couple quick questions. First question for you is, you talk about if you impound a vehicle and there's other people in there and they're intoxicated or children, what are you currently doing if that person doesn't have a license or something? What's the PD currently doing?
Talking about driving under suspension?
Yeah,
I
say
think
a
for
guy.
the most part, yeah, they're told that you can't drive this vehicle and they're cited and you leave.
Okay, but the people that are inside the vehicle, if they're intoxicated or something, they got children, and you talk about some of the issues, if you did impound that vehicle in here, what are you currently doing, because they can't drive it, and if that other person in there is intoxicated and the liability issues that go along with it, what do we do now to accommodate them people?
Well, I would say that they would still remain in the vehicle, the person that doesn't have the license. At least the vehicle offers them some kind of security from the elements or from whatever else being in the vehicle. They can make their phone calls, they can lock their doors, if it's raining, whatever. The vehicle provides them with that kind of shelter or sanctuary.
Okay. I don't know if I'm totally sold on that, because most people have cell phones and things like that nowadays anywhere where they can still make that call.
And they, you're right, they can,
Yeah.
but I mean, we don't have to wait.
Okay. Okay. Now, pretty much Clear Lake, the Sheriff's Department, State Patrol, they're already, most other law enforcement agencies are already doing this.
Around here.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of the mind, I'm willing to give up the insurance part of it. I don't see that as a greater need, so to speak. I do like the idea of the driving under suspensions, and obviously there's a need and concern on that as a whole, as far as I'm concerned. And I do like the idea, I know a lot of things happen, so I like the idea of you guys having some discretion on it. If you got other more important things that need to take place, I'm all right with, as long as the police officer documents it, does what they need to do, and then moves on. I'm okay with that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
So basically what you're saying is that no matter what, there'd be a citation or something that would be done against the individual, but if time constraints impact or a greater precedent call, for lack of a better term,
I think so.
would occur, that they be allowed to not do an impounding procedure and simply do a citation.
Yeah, well, and I think you gotta give them that flexibility, so to speak. We give them that oversight when they pull somebody over for speeding or seatbelt violation. They're not writing a seatbelt violation every time they pull somebody over or a speeding ticket. I think it's good to let that police officer, I trust the chief, staff, to give them that discretion, so to speak, that if there's something more serious or other needs that need to take place, they can handle it timely and they move on and handle the needs that they have to do.
Because that can be also, from talking with the chief, dependent on each shift too. So-
Sure.
And the amount of force that might be able to be deployed on a given night, based on a sickness that might occur. They might be fine to start, but then be shorthanded.
Sure. So I'm fine with giving them that discretion, so to speak.
What I hear you saying is you'd like, generally like the ordinance that is out here, but you wanna pull
I would
the
pull-
driving without insurance,
Driving
just
with-
pull it out.
I would pull driving without insurance completely off of it, so.
Go ahead.
Well, I just
I mean,
mean,
Mr. Kuhn's gonna go, but were you
Oh.
saying you agreed, or you,
yeah, let him go then, I'll talk.
Mr. Kuhn, he was in order.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yep, go ahead.
And Councilman Hickey and I talked before the last, whatever council meeting when we decided to pull this. We're bouncing ideas back and forth, and I greatly appreciate his leadership on this. There's only, basically looking at section, the subject to seizure section, and where we're looking at the different violations. 1 and 2 and 4 through 9, I think, our top priority being public safety. I think this is an avenue to really make a difference on those different violations, more serious violations. To try to wrap my head around this, because I am by no means a law enforcement expert. When we deal with issues like this, I try to do like many of us do a ride along with officers. And a week ago, last Friday, I went out with a sergeant, and so we could kind of see what all the other officers was doing. And my main concern with 3 and 10, with proof of insurance and driving under suspension, was just the time that would be allocated if we put this in place. Because that evening, every officer that was under that, on their beat, all night long, busy with domestic issues, drugs, burglary. And not to say these aren't serious, but given the fact that we only have so many hours in the day and so many resources, I would be concerned with the chain of custody process in an hour or two to tow a vehicle for those 2 items, 3 and 10, that the resources we would be taking off the street to make sure we're following that chain of custody while it's being impounded, that we would be taking officers away from, in my mind, more serious issues going on in the community. And just, that was one night, but all night long, they were busy with those. The discretion was a concern of mine, and also with item number 3, the operating a motor vehicle on a suspended, revoked, barred license. In the memo here, it talks about the #1 reason people are suspended, revoked, or have a barred license is because of non-payment of fines of civil fees. My concern is the more lower income folks in the community, if we're putting on top of the fact that they're already having a hardship to pay these fines, an additional $200 fine and towing fees, are we really solving a problem, or are we just putting them in more of a financial hardship when this is their way to work, way to get health care? So while I agree with the our ultimate goal here, I would be supportive of, just speaking for myself, as written with officer discretion, eliminating 3 and 10.
I'm
done.
Sure. Yep. Ms. Lee?
That's exactly where I was gonna basically go. 3 and 10. 10 to me is almost a non-starter for me. When I look at it, 10 doesn't, I just think that's a bad idea. And I didn't see it in here, but I sent a note out to City Administrator Trout, and from my understanding, was I wrong though? The state actually says they can drive the vehicle for 3 days? Was that right or not?
There's the allowance to drive the vehicle for 2 days. They have to pull the plates, chief.
It's, yeah, in the code section, it gives an officer 4 options if they pull someone over for no insurance. One is they can give them a warning. Second one is they can give them a citation. Third one is they can pull their license and registration, issue them a citation. They can operate that vehicle for, I think it's 48 hours. And the point of that is for them to get it off the street. And then the 4th option is what we're talking about here, but in the state code, it talks about pulling license, registration, and then impounding.
See that, so that's where it sounds like 3 of us are, maybe not for 10 anyways, but I mean, if you can possibly drive a car for 48 hours to get off the street, I don't see why we wouldn't allow somebody to do that. And instead of just taking their vehicle for an insurance reason. So that's kind of where I was on 10. 3, kind of echoing that. I don't really want to for unpaid civil fines, which is a misdemeanor, to take a car on top of the fines that they would be paying, to me is impounding the cycle of, whatever, it's a term I can't remember, but basically there's a cycle that you fall in trap, and we're gonna emphasize that, and I don't wanna be part of that necessarily. I mean, I understand sometimes you have a suspended license for drinking and stuff, and this is, okay, that's different. And when it comes up, when you're running their license, do you know for why it's suspended?
Right. When you talk, the 3 different code sections that are identified in there, find it. For the ordinance. $321,561 is for a habitual offender. That's someone that has repeated traffic offenses and just doesn't seem to get it. So the habitual offender is barment, and that's for 6 years. Driving while, the 321J21 is for OWI.
And when it comes up, when you run their license,
Yes.
you know why it's suspended?
Yes, it'll say suspended, reference 321J21, OWI revocation.
Yeah. Well, to me, that 321-218 would be, I don't wanna see us impounding for that one, the third one, and I don't wanna see 10. Everything else to me makes sense, I understand the arguments there. The other thing, just talking with, actually, Dan Rainmaker and I have talked a lot about this, and I'm not a huge fan of the entire impoundment, I can be convinced of 8 of them. But then, is this something, and I talked to Mr. Trott about this, and he said, bring it up and we'll see where it goes, but is this something, if we're not overly excited about it, but yet we wanna give the tools to the police officers to do what they want, is this something we put a sunset clause in 2 years? Not just to say, we can always say, well, we can take it off, but we also all understand taking something off is a whole lot harder than, putting it back on or something like that. In 2 years, after we have 2 years of ample collection of data and fines and see all this, does it automatically come off? And then we as a council would have to decide if we're gonna put it back on. If it's going well for the city, there'd be no problem putting it back on. And if it isn't going well, we will be told by the citizens very clearly that this is a bad idea, and so in 2 years it would be off. And so I'm looking at putting maybe a sunset clause on this, not just a report in a year or two, but actually a sunset clause, because I'll also say it, maybe I should, but in about a couple months, Officer Lashbrook won't be our chief. And I know in the past, being a citizen for Mason City for 40 years, we haven't always had, I'd hate to see this in the wrong hands, truthfully. I'm gonna say it. I think an ordinance like this in the wrong hands could be really abused. And I'd rather see it in the hands of the citizens or us to decide if it continues or not in 2 years. So I would put a sunset clause on this for 2 years, but I also want to see what other people have to say. Thank you.
Well, at the council meeting a couple weeks ago, I staked out a preliminary position, and I did so intentionally trying to solicit feedback from the community, and I haven't had any citizens, and I have received feedback. I have not had any citizens say that they support such an ordinance, and every piece of feedback I've had has been against the ordinance, and they've articulated some pretty good reasons why. And some of those, I really appreciate the text that you have in here that explains different sections that help me understand. And actually, it brought to light some of the concerns that citizens were trying to express to me. And for me, my concerns all fall under section 8-11-3, vehicle subject to seizure and penalty. And you've stated in your text, or in your explanation, as a general rule, MCPD does not tow and impound vehicles. It's a general rule. Situations that would call for such action involve vehicles subject to forfeiture, having evidentiary value, or being held pending a search warrant. So in those cases, we have probable cause, and we're following a legal procedure to get a search warrant to go through the vehicle. We also on occasion tow based on parking and custodial arrest made from a vehicle, and it's secured at the scene. Here's where it starts becoming concerning for me. This ordinance will subject every impounded vehicle to a police search without the benefit of a search warrant or probable cause. It is called an inventory search. And so now we've already identified that the vast majority of impoundments will most likely be as a result of a misdemeanor, either driving without insurance or driving while suspended or some other misdemeanor. And now we're gonna take misdemeanors that would not otherwise be subject to search via a warrant, and because of the inventory procedure, subject them to search. I'm very concerned about that, and that concern has been expressed to me by citizens. And then we go on to say that we know anecdotally from Cedar Rapids that such searches generally result in additional charges only 10 to 15% of the time. And to me, that's a significant erosion in citizen rights for what we get on the return of not only police time, but citizens' rights. We have stated that on average, a driving under suspension or no insurance typically takes 10 to 20 minutes. And we're gonna turn that into 1 or 2 hours. And so we're, as has been stated, we're taking officers, and we all know that we have bigger problems in the community. We're gonna tie up their time, and now we're gonna subject, on average, the poorest of our poorest, for whatever reason, fall into this category and dump more fines and burdens on them. And at the same time erode some of their rights. I'm very concerned about that. We're at a strange point in time in our country right now with things that have happened in Missouri, things that are happening in Baltimore. You know, when we did the armored vehicle a year and a half, 2 years ago, however long that wasn't well received by the community, and a big part of that was communication. But we are at a point in time where people are very suspicious of police actions, and there's concern, and I think no matter how well intended, people are concerned about incremental police powers that erode citizen rights. And to me, there just hasn't been a proven need for such an ordinance, or at least a proven need that justifies what we're giving up in return. Mason City's never had such an ordinance. I wasn't even aware that we had a problem like this until it came up in September as a suggestion at a work session. And I'm not yet convinced that this really solves any significant problems that we have. I think we have bigger problems that require more attention. And so for that reason, at this point in time, and the process remains fluid as they always do, but at this point in time, I'm negative on any ordinance at all, even trying it with a sunset clause. I don't think the people in the community are convinced we need it, and I don't think it's the role of the council to convince the community that we need it. I think if it's something that the police department really feels that we need, or staff really feels that we need, you guys need to take the impetus and make presentations at the podium with slideshow, or however you want to do it during a council meeting. But you guys take the lead in showing the community why this is a good idea and why we need it, and let my phone start ringing from citizens that say, yeah, we should try this. And then maybe my opinion would change. But that's where I am at this point in time. Thank you.
Mr. Alves?
I guess I'll jump in. This has been quite a great discussion, and for myself, I'm glad Councilman Trunquist went first, because he's kind of on the same track that I am, and he's so much more articulate than I am when it comes to saying it. But from my perspective, I look at a lot of things in a cost-benefit ratio, and I don't think the cost to us on doing this ordinance, and I'm talking about the cost to the citizens, I'm talking about the cost to the police department and extra time and money and effort and everything, is going to be the benefit that we want to see. And in that respect, I'm leaning the way Mr. Trunquist is leaning, is that I'm not in favor of this ordinance at all. And if it comes out where the citizens are saying to us, we need it, we need to do something, then we can look at it again. That's it.
Ms. Silver?
Due to my occupation, I've really struggled with this, and I mean really struggled with it. And it's basically because whenever you have more violations, you pay more for insurance, and then if you can't afford insurance, you sit there and drive around without it. And then when you hit somebody who when you're at fault in an accident, then how are you gonna pay for that other party's damages? So you don't have insurance, so then the state of Iowa jumps in and they're like, okay, you just caused $2,500 worth of damage to Janet's vehicle, and how are you gonna pay for it? It's not me asking for it, it's the state of Iowa asking for it, okay? So you have to set a payment plan up with the state of Iowa for $100, $200 a month, whatever it is. And then you have your license yet, as long as you keep paying the state for your fine, to pay for my damages. If you ever don't make that monthly payment, then your license is suspended. Okay? And so, sometimes these people dig themselves in deeper holes, you know, they go around speeding. I'm not the one driving for them, I'm not the one speeding, I'm not the one getting into accidents, I'm not the one not obeying the traffic signals. I'm not the one smoking a doobie down in Central Park, you know, and get busted for it, it's on my driving record, you know, I mean, they're doing that, not me. And so, it's kind of disturbing to see that there's 44 tickets in March of 2015. There was 44 tickets for no insurance. I don't know if some of those came in line with the DUS, the driving under suspension, or the OWIs, or how they all came to be, how these numbers came to be. But more than likely, when you're driving while you're suspended, you don't have insurance, because how can you get insurance when you don't have a valid driver's license? You know, this tangled web just gets deeper and deeper on the insurance side of things. And you folks have no idea how deep it goes. And the contacts that I started getting were from,
She sells insurance.
we have more and more of the auto dealers popping up that are loaning money for the cars. And so instead of going to a bank, the auto dealers are the bank for these people. And they've come to me and they're just like, well, Janet, there's this violation. My car technically gets impounded, because it's not theirs yet, because they haven't paid for it yet. My car gets impounded. I'm not contacted for 72 hours. Where does that leave me? I have to pay the $250 fee, I have to pay for storage, you know, and then I get my car back. And so that's where I've been not really too excited about the no insurance violations, because these auto dealers have a right to their vehicles, you know, if they're not getting paid for. I do think we need something. I don't think it should just go by the wayside, but I'm not sure what that something is. I mean, it sounds to me like we want to cut, you know, what was it, 3 to 10? Some of them were mentioning cutting out of here. But I think some of these violations are very troubling. I mean, when you pick somebody up for an OWI, they're the only one in the vehicle. What happens to that vehicle? Because you have them in the police car, you've taken them to the police station. Where does that vehicle go?
We just lock it up and secure it. If it's not a traffic hazard, just leave it.
Nobody gets called to tow it? No relatives come take it home?
No,
Nothing?
when they get released in the morning, they can go to their car and drive off.
And you're saying like when they get picked up for driving while suspended, if there's no one else in the vehicle, you still just kind
Yeah,
of
we
give
don't-
them a ticket and let them drive away?
Yeah, we don't arrest them as a process, yeah, we don't arrest them. So they're basically told, you can't drive.
But they
Under
drive away
suspension.
anyway, right in front of you?
Huh?
But they drive away right in front of you
I
though?
don't think so.
You wait,
They wait
they wait for you to leave, go around the block.
Right.
I mean, I don't understand when you pick these people up for driving under suspension,
She sells insurance.
what happens to that car when they're the only one there?
They're left with the car. 'Cause I really don't wanna get into making custodial
No,
arrests.
that's okay, but I was just like, I don't understand what happens to these cars half the time, you know, it's kind of like, I don't like them out there, you know, in harm's way so that somebody else can have an accident with
Well,
them
they're
or
legally
whatever,
parked,
but.
correct? They're legally parked,
When,
correct?
yes, I mean, when you're talking about the OWIs and stuff, where someone's taken into custody, the vehicle is either legally parked or it may be on private property, and if the property owner is okay with it, we'll leave it there. If not, or if it is a hazard, a lot of times officers will ask the person in custody, your car can't sit where it is, do you mind if we move it? And they'll move it, if they agree to that. If they don't agree to it, then we'll tow it.
Okay. All right. Honestly, like Gene said, we've had a lot of great conversation here. I need to take it and digest it just a little bit more. And I know it's just not all about me, just because I sell insurance. I really have to try to get my mindset on what would be beneficial, if anything, on this for the community, and take my profession out of it. And that's what I'm really honestly struggling with.
Might want to try that.
Because everybody keeps saying, well, we're gonna make them poorer, we're gonna make them poorer. Well, like I said, I'm not the one behind the wheel doing this, you know? I mean, they're doing it for themselves. And I know it's their mode of transportation, it's a way to, you know, get their jobs, you know, provide health insurance and all that kind of thing, but there still are methods in place for these people to make monthly payments to retain their driver's licenses.
Just before I go, Mr. Hickey and Mr. Kim, did you have any comments you'd like to make, Mr. Nelson?
Not, I can think of right now. But you got a question?
Mr. Hickey?
Okay. I can concede 3 and 10, because I can already see where this is going, which is fine. But I still think if we're talking about public safety, we already got our state patrol doing it, we got our sheriff's department doing it, we got other communities in the area doing it. I would still like to see the greater offenses, the drugs, the weapons, things that we should be concerned about. And we've had issues in this town in the past, not so long ago. And I know Councilman Tork was in a discussion that he had at the council meeting I've had with him. He even said that, and I've had a lot of public feedback too, a lot of it, and a lot of support, where maybe we take 3 and 10 off the table and at least try the rest, moving forward with a greater, the drug conviction, you know, I don't know any prostitution or anything like that in town, but the more serious things. And then again, if that happens, then there is a greater need maybe to use our police staff to take care of that vehicle. And that'll reduce the time spent on our force to the point where there's very minimal, but the greater things that need to be taken care of in our police department, gives our police officers a chance to handle these situations appropriately and get the vehicles, things off the street that need to be taken care of, the drugs, everything.
And they still have discretion.
And they still have discretion to handle it. I would at least like to see that moving forward. And then that, at least, if we're worried about the driving under suspensions and insurance and piling it on to where we feel is a, you know, a poor class citizen, so to speak, then that protects them from this ordinance. But at least we can handle, you know, the greater crimes that probably need to be addressed. That gives us the department another avenue to handle.
Okay. Yeah, you were done.
Yeah.
Chief, Captain, this has been a very unique process, how this came forward and how we got back to the work session table. Back in, was it September, when we first sat here and talked about this? Personally, I was under the impression, and Officer Kemna did fantastic work, and I commend him. I really appreciate the work he did. Coming into that meeting, I thought it had full support from his superiors, which it did not. And then we had our discussion that night, and ended up on a council meeting agenda with what I would call a lackluster recommendation of support with your guys' concerns. You've heard all of our comments. Is this worth your officers' time to put this in place without 3 and 10?
My personal opinion, and based on what I know and what I believe in the 35 years that I've been an officer, I really don't see the need. I agree 100% with Mr. Tornquist on what his comments are. The more serious offenses that he talked about are few and far between. So in that sense, if you want them on there, that's fine. But in most cases, when we come across a situation like that, we're probably gonna have some kind of probable cause to search the vehicle, and if we want to impound the vehicle. I don't know that we necessarily need the ordinance for it. The only ones that probably where those situations wouldn't apply would be your driving offenses. You're driving under revocation for OWI and for your barment. Search incident to arrest doesn't necessarily apply in those situations, but in those others it would. And it would be based on a constitutional exception to the Fourth Amendment, other than trying to create an ordinance that's gonna let us just do it. So that's my personal opinion. I know there's, I understand a lot of the comments made. I really don't think, and that's what I said that night at the work session, 3 and 10, the simple misdemeanor stuff, I can't wrap my head around it. But I have never been part of any organization that towed in an impound just based on, because we can do it. And so it's hard for me to accept any of the what's brought this forward, because I just don't see a legitimate law enforcement need to do it.
So what I'm hearing is, when we really boil this all down, everything, the intent, which I agree with, minus 3 and 10, the intent of this, 1 and 2 and 4 through 9, we can search and impound currently without putting anything in place.
I mean, there's the likelihood, because of the criminal offense itself, if you arrest them from their vehicle or in the vehicle, then based on search incident to arrest, we're gonna be able to search the passenger compartment of that vehicle to look for evidence relating to that offense. So when you run into like an OWI, you can search that vehicle incident to arrest, because you can look for things like containers of alcohol, or maybe receipts from a bar, or anything that might be indicative of what that person had consumed that night. But when you get into the driving under suspensions, revocations, and barment, there really isn't any evidence that you can search for in that vehicle that's going to link them to that particular offense. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think for the most part, you can. I can't say absolutely. It's going to depend on the circumstances. But if you catch them in the car with one of those offenses, you can probably search. High likelihood you'll be able to.
Thank you.
Do we know what the county sheriffs and the Iowa State Patrol, I mean, do they do everything that we have listed here, impound the vehicles? Do we have any clue?
Custodial arrests, and I think they'll arrest people under suspension. The sheriff's department, I've seen their policy, it's discretionary. So you can pull one person over, as I understand it, for driving under suspension, and if you don't wanna arrest, tow, and impound their car, you don't need to. If you pull someone over that you wanna do that to, you can. State Patrol, I'm not really sure how their policy works, but I did have discussions with a trooper who, and it makes sense to me, when you're in a municipality in a city like this, the need to really tow away vehicles from the scene isn't as necessary as if you're pulling someone over out on a county blacktop. And to leave that car sitting out overnight out on a county blacktop or gravel road, maybe the same thing for the county, I can't really tell you why. But, in the city where a great part of the area is lit, and it could, to me, there's not that much need to pull it out of there. It doesn't make it any less a target, but leaving it out in the boonies somewhere just doesn't seem apparently is good practice.
I'm just wondering the need for consistency between the different departments. Not really necessary because of the.
Like I worked for 4 agencies. All of them have been municipalities. None of them ever arrested, towed, and impounded for driving under insurance, without insurance, and suspension. The counties always did. It's always been a battle that I've had as chief in Spencer, chief here, And even when I was down in Cedar Falls, is they see other agencies doing it, they're getting to search vehicles, and they want to do that because of that reason. Because they feel then that they're gonna get into this criminal activity. It's for some reason for us not to do it makes us seem somehow, I don't know, not as aggressive, but I guess I don't see it that way. Our call volume is probably at least 4 times greater than the county and Clear Lake. So maybe part of that is due to the fact that they may have more time to do these things. And again, I'm just guessing, and I'm certainly not casting any stones in any other department in this area. They're doing what they do. That's their choice. I'm all for it. But again, based on what I know and what I believe, I'm not.
I appreciate that, thank you.
I still, kind of what I said earlier, I just, Councilman Kuhn said this, and I was gonna address it too. I think it's really is amazing as a process that we have, and you kind of said it's maybe the police officer's job or staff to convince people we need this. And the problem with that is I think we have a staff that isn't too excited about it. We have a chief who's not excited about it, but yet they've allowed the process to go through. And this is what we have. We have some officers who really want it. They weren't gonna speak for the council, they weren't gonna speak for the citizens, so they allowed this to come through, and I appreciate that completely. Obviously, this is kind of where we get to decide from here, and it'll move on, but I think the process has been kind of amazing to watch, because I appreciate everything you said. Obviously, you're not compassionate about this, but you're like, you work for the city and the citizens, and maybe this is what the city wants, so I can appreciate you kind of doing this, and it really does show the great leadership. And Mr. Trout, the same with you, I know everything I've read or talked to you weren't excited about this either, and you brought it to us anyway, so thank you to both of you. But like I said, I'm not excited about it. I could be convinced of 8 of the 10, one way or the other, but 3 and 10 to me are off the table. And I still, if we did try 8 of the 10, I personally would fight for a sunset clause. And then that's kind of where I'm at.
Please.
I still stand by the recommendation that I have. This implementation of this ordinance is a possibility without the driving under suspension and the driving without insurance. And partly because even though the chief has made comments relative to the ability to be able to do search and seizure based on the other types of offenses that he already has on the books relative to it, sometimes I just think it provides the opportunity that if it meets one of these higher level offenses, through their processes, it's just additional backup relative to the procedures being followed correctly with the officer. If he determines that I think this was an offense that occurred, go ahead and implement this policy. It may be overkill, and I'm saying that it may be overkill because I'm not an officer. I've been through ILEA and knowing, okay, this is an offense, I can seize this car. But for me, I think it simplifies the ability of the officer to be able to seize that car and do the search and impound it in a much easier fashion because they know this exists. And so for me, that's the way I look at it. Maybe it doesn't need to be simplified for the officer because they already know what the procedures they can use are. But that's part of my logic behind the position that I feel. I think the more serious offenses, we need to have the ability to take that car from the individual when it occurs.
You're basically saying everything but 3 and 10.
Right. I would be okay with as far as implementing something like that. How often it would be used, I think it would be less of an impact on our force relative to the enactment, actually using it. Because more than likely, they're probably going to end up impounding that vehicle anyway. If they had that violation, that's probably one they would have done anyway. So we're not taking them away from something that they wouldn't otherwise do.
So from a legal aspect, does that give our police staff more cover if we have 1 through 10 minus 3 or take away 3 and 10?
What do you mean by cover?
Well, or as Mr. Trout said, that by having that ordinance in place, it allows our staff to be able to, it's already be on the books, so to speak, where it makes their job easier to move forward if that's what they need to do.
Well, I guess I'm not sure I understand your question. Without 3 and 10, there's going to be significantly fewer incidents where
Sure.
impoundment would be justified. The way the ordinance reads, and I think probably rightfully so, it indicates that the officer shall impound when the situation warrants it. They still have some discretion if they have another business.
Sure.
That's what it says. So I think, yeah, I think it'd be a benefit to them. It would certainly reduce the amount of time that officers have to spend with those types of things. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I guess, what I was looking at is, he would know that when he makes a stop that involves one of those offenses, he has the legal justification based on the city ordinance to be able to do so. And then it would really come down to whether he would be not acting outside the bounds that he would be allowed to for the decision to do it in town. Because he would have the city council putting a law in place saying you will impound or you can impound with these violations occur.
That would justify the impoundment.
Right. That's what I was getting at. And there may be the idea that they, based on the discussion they've had with the chief, those justifications may already exist because of the type of offense that occurred. He would have that right anyway, and so the idea that it might be overkill to have this in place has been argued by the chief. But it would just be an additional comment or additional law that would ensure that best they have the justification to be able to do that.
Well, I haven't heard anything that's changed my mind, and based on everything that I've heard, I think it's only underscored the opinion that I came in here with tonight. In those cases where we have probable cause, we can impound right now. And what we're talking about doing is cutting a very wide swath to give a police officer very significant latitude to impound if he wants, and at the same time have discretion. And with discretion comes perceived favorability. And then you start having situations that appear to be very similar, but people aren't necessarily being treated the same. And I think that that may create more problems than it solves. Again, we have the ability to impound right now if we have probable cause. This creates an opportunity where pretty near everybody that's stopped is in a situation where their vehicle can be seized and it could be searched without probable cause whatsoever. I'm concerned with that, and I absolutely wouldn't support it with 3 and 8 or 3 and 10 in there, but I don't support it at all. And I think it's important to remember, at least from my perspective, we have a police chief that's now in his 4th municipality, and he'll do what the council wants him to do. But if it were his choice, he doesn't support this ordinance. And I don't pretend to know more about law enforcement than our police chief or any other officer on staff. But I rely on the chief. He's the senior law enforcement officer in the city. And I'm just even more so convinced as I've listened to everybody's perspective that this would be a mistake.
I guess I never heard you say that you would impound anybody.
Huh?
You said it was likely, but you never said.
I can't guarantee, but like I said, if you find somebody in the vehicle committing one of those offenses, you're more than likely gonna have probable cause to search it. Whether or not you really want to impound it, I mean, part of my thought of this whole thing was the fact that we want to impound it so we can search. So if we could go ahead based on probable cause, search the vehicle, why do I want to impound it? Why do I need to impound it? We don't need the car.
Money grab. It's the money grab.
I'm
They're
just,
just trying to take
do we have
everybody's
any
money.
idea how the officers
Too
feel about
smart.
this? I mean, one brought it forward, I mean, are we 50-50,
Oh, I-
60-40? Any clue? I mean, do,
No, I haven't done a survey. I know there's some that think this is a great deal, and I know others say the reason why we don't impound and seize and impound now is because of the paperwork that it generates. They don't wanna put in that time for that. No, I didn't go around and conduct any polls.
at the risk of sounding brash, I don't care what the officers think. I care what the chief thinks. He's the department head. And I think, from time to time, people forget that council members are citizens of the community elected to look out after the interests of the citizens of the community, not the interests of individual departments or department heads or staff in general. We're elected to look out for the interests of the citizens. And so the only argument that could be made for this ordinance on behalf of the citizens would be public safety. And I have not heard a compelling argument that puts us in a position of improved public safety. In fact, an argument could be made that we diminish public safety because of tying up officer time on misdemeanors. I think it's in the best interest of the citizens that we not have this ordinance, and I haven't heard anything that leads me to believe that we're diminishing or endangering our officers.
Mr.
I'll give it to you. That's fine. But I think we just had a survey where we asked for employees' opinions and stuff like in the sanitation department.
No, sir, we did not ask for employees, we asked for citizens' opinions.
One council member
The
did.
employees-
One council member did.
The council didn't, a council member may have. We surveyed the citizens.
I'm just stating a fact.
Bad example,
No,
Travis.
To expedite things here,
Yeah.
it doesn't look like there's majority support for what we have in front of us.
Well, we clearly know that we don't, it doesn't appear to me that anyone's in favor of 3 and 10, so generally speaking, that is not. So, is this worth moving forward on, to continue to develop? That's really the question. I mean, I already know we've got 2, so it's basically up to you 4 whether you guys want to move forward. And then if anybody feels passionate about it, they can put it on the agenda one way or the other. So,
That's
I
what I
mean,
was, my point was gonna be, speaking for myself,
let it sit where it lies, and then you guys can.
Well, I was gonna say, my views on this, I stated in my opening comment there. But the fact of the matter is, Councilman Hickey, whoever could bring this and put it on the agenda, you could bring it with 3 and 10 out. I'm not gonna rally behind this and say that we need to spend as much time that it would take over 3 readings, where, given the information that I've received coming into this meeting and from our chief law enforcement officer, that the people that will be implementing this, the department, it's not worth the time, given the fact that we can do the things that we are seeking out to do without going through this. I don't see it worth the time at the moment.
Anybody else?
But I'm only one of those 4 you were looking for feedback from.
Well,
Generally,
it's
go ahead.
done, it's done, so.
Okay. Generally speaking, it seems like there's not support for staff to necessarily spend time on this if